The SEC will let corporate whistleblowers collect as much as 30% of penalties when they report financial wrongdoing, even when they bypass companies' internal complaint systems. Joining me from our Washington studio, Jacob Frenkel, a former SEC attorney in the Enforcement Division. He's now a partner at Shulman Rogers. Jacob, welcome back to Bottom Line. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Mark. Good to see you.
Is this new chapter, a new chapter, I should say, in corporate compliance?
It certainly is a new chapter. In many respects, it's understandable, but to me, it's also very unfortunate. Congress mandated in Dodd-Frank that the SEC must make the payment. I think the big problem here was that use of the mandatory language in the law, and basically that, hey, SEC, pass the rules you're going to use to implement it, but you must pay between 10 to 30%. And while encouraging whistleblowers and ensuring that whistleblowers have protection is absolutely essential, and I don't want to suggest otherwise, I think this mandatory payment component of Dodd-Frank is actually, it creates a risk of undermining years of advances in corporate governance and corporate compliance.
Why do you say that?
Well, because we've been working so hard, the Commission, we in the private bar, counseling corporations, to set up systems that encourage building of trust, cooperation, and voluntary reporting of complaints so companies can fix. Not fix for the purpose of avoiding a disclosure. If there are problems, companies have learned to make voluntary disclosures to the SEC or to the Justice Department. But to, in essence, create a financial incentive by which whistleblowers altogether can bypass internal reporting mechanisms. You know, the SEC has set, within the rule, has set up a formula by which certain factors will increase the payment to the whistleblower, certain factors will decrease the payment. But the fact is, there's still that mandatory minimum 10%. There's the minimum threshold of $1 million, and because of those components, I see more bad than good coming from this.
Jacob, companies wanted the SEC to require whistleblowers to report problems, as we mentioned, through internal compliance first, and then go to the agency. Why did the SEC reject that approach?
Because of the way Congress wrote the law. Because Congress, in writing that provision in Dodd-Frank, which all we can assume is they really had not focused on the implications, used the word must. And by creating that obligation of the SEC to pay, it took away that discretionary component. I was actually an early advocate of the notion of what in the public company world we talk about 10 Cap A reporting, which is for outside auditors, where they're first obligated under Section 10 capital letter A of the Securities and Exchange Act of 1934, first to report problems, illegal acts internally, to give the company the opportunity to resolve them, and only then, after going through the internal reporting mechanisms, to then create the opportunity or the avenue for reporting to directly the SEC. What happened here in Dodd-Frank with the whistleblower provision is it makes the payment mandatory and takes out that incentive for internal reporting, even though the SEC has tried to manage that.
Jacob, does today's vote do enough to protect whistleblowers from retaliation?
Well, the law is what protects whistleblowers from retaliation. And I think there are adequate laws on the books. The real challenge when you're talking about whistleblower protection is subtle retaliation. And there are a lot of components that go into that. And we in the outside counsel world do a lot to counsel corporations as to how to manage the dynamic of a whistleblower.
Right.
Whistleblowers are always going to come under scrutiny, but yes, it certainly reinforces that the law is designed to protect them.
Jacob, in our last 30 seconds, can we draw an arc from today's vote back to the Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme?
We draw an arc from today's vote, as well as the financial markets collapse all connects to Dodd-Frank, and certainly there's a belief that whether it would have been the Stanford case, Bernie Madoff, other major cases, if there had been a vehicle for outside reporting, that it would have mitigated the risk. As a practical matter, people are who want to conceal frauds are going to conceal frauds. It's not going to deter fraud.
Yeah.
All it does is create a complication, in my view, for corporate compliance.
Jacob Frenkel, former staff attorney in the SEC's Enforcement Division, now with Shulman Rogers in Washington. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.